Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if we could sit down, we'll get House Higher Ed rolling here in just a minute. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Higher Ed Committee to order and get us started. We have a number of items, and I'm going to try to touch each one of them as we go forward to make sure we have the proper documents. Everything we're going to hear today, we're going to further discuss and make sure that we get the numbers, the LC numbers that are the current versions out into the public domain. They have been, in most cases, since last Thursday with some minor changes that Chairman Wiedauer can speak to on 386. But if I could, as we move to the agenda, I would like, the only item we'll take action on today, I would like to ask the committee to consider action for Chairman Shaw Blackman's study committee so that we can move that forward. You've had this is the same document you had last week. The chairman is just looking to work with TCSG and the university system about our credit hours. If everyone will recall, we went to semester some time ago, and he wishes just to measure. We've heard some thoughts, at least, that quarter system is more nimble. In regard to that, if you recall, Georgia Military seemed to think so. So with that, you have before you House Resolution 1384. This is a study committee by Chairman Shaw Blackman, LC 491880, to allow the speaker to make some appointments to this and look at this over the summer. We have that. I'll answer any questions for the chairman. I don't think Chairman Blackman made it in. I'll try to answer questions about the resolution, but we would put that forward if there are no questions. Are there questions? See no questions. Is there a motion, LC 491880, House Resolution 1384? Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this? This is a study committee, House Resolution 1384. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. It moves on to rules. And here we go. Try to do a better job with the batting order than I did at our previous meeting. Let's do Senate Bill 390. I'm going to call Senator Walker. Or you were here a minute ago. There you go. If you want to come up, you get the comm today because you you didn't change the document, so you get to go first. So if you tell us a little bit about that, and then I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure, Chairman Martin. We had quite a lengthy discussion on this last week in this committee, so I won't belabor the point. But the American Library Association, in my opinion, are trying to poison the minds of our children with their radical agenda and their Marxist leader that they have. This bill would propose defunding the American Library Association and untangle our public libraries from being held hostage by them and having grants dangled over them and all the certification requirements and all that stuff.
Okay, for those that saw the hand motions like I was a third base coach. Chairman Blackman had joined us, and I told him he was okay. We got his resolution out. So if anybody's wondering what you have a couple of questions on this, and again, I would let the members know that I'm going to ask the gentleman to look at a couple of things with the bill as well, but we'll go to those first. Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify, this bill on lines 22 and 23 refer to a very specific person. Is it not true that that person will no longer be the president of the American Library Association before this bill would even go into effect?
I've been told her term expires in June. I guess she could run, I don't know what their rules are, if she could run again or whatnot.
There's already a president-elect who is a individual from Kansas. So this bill goes after a person who is no longer going to be affiliated with the organization. Is that correct?
I think she'll be a past president. I'm sure she'll still be on the executive board. I mean, this was a great organization, represents hundreds of thousands. I mean, I think somebody said 500,000 librarians, or a lot of librarians. But this small group has commandeered the program, and they're trying to push down political agenda on our local libraries, and I'm just tired of it.
One final question, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Make it a question. We're not going to get in the back and forth. Yes, ma'am.
No, it's a question. On line 48, this bill dictates that the Board of Regents will not be able to use privately donated funds to do with what they would like to do if it has something to do with the American Library Association. In your opinion, is there any other laws that we put on how we spend our private dollars, how private dollars are spent? Do you think that's a role for the state?
To me, once a public library accepts a private donation and that donor gets a tax deduction for giving the money, it becomes public money and it's commingled with the rest of their funds, and that's why we put that, to make that stipulation clear.
All right, I think that's a dangerous precedent, but thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I disagree.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to ask my committee and those that are presenting the bills. We're not going back and forth with each other. Just not going to do it.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Not going to do it.
I sat in here for an hour and a half and got the
understand.
shit beat out of me. Excuse my language.
We're not going to do that anymore.
Okay, let's don't do that.
We're not going to do that anymore. I mean, that was as much, to my member, to my colleague as yours. We're just, you have your opinion, she has yours, and I value both of them. They inform us all, but we're just not going to do that. Whip Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the questions from my Democratic colleague that I think are fair and in line with the bill. Senator Walker, is the state of Georgia going to be providing any of the funds that your bill would otherwise take away from Georgia public libraries, or is it the intent to proceed with defunding Georgia's public libraries this year?
In the FY25 budget, the line item to support our public libraries from the state of Georgia is $36 million. We heard examples of grants for $100,000, $200,000 over a 2-year period, but the state is supporting our libraries very robustly, and our local governments are also.
So my understanding is that the state of Georgia public libraries received about $400,000 for ADA accommodations, for rural broadband. And so what you're telling me is the state of Georgia will not be providing any additional funds?
We increased the appropriation for libraries in the FY25 budget to, like I said, about $36 million.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little prerogative here, and unless somebody wants to challenge the rule in the chair. We had this discussion before. The gentleman was asking and answered the questions. I wanted him to come forward again because I wanted to put forward that there are some concerns across Senator Walker that I'd like to get with you with on the terminology being a bit broad. So if you would work with me between now and our meeting on Wednesday, we'll bring this back for the committee to take a look at that. And there's 6 questions. If y'all would indulge me and give me the latitude as the chair to work with the gentleman, and then you can question he, I, and everybody on what we have before us on Wednesday. Is that fair? Anybody feel an absolute pressing desire? We have a lot of things on the agenda. We're gonna go there, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.
And I'll
Chairman.
get with you. And I appreciate you with us. And you're right. You were here for a minute the other day and sat through.
Well, let me apologize for my lack of decorum to both my Democratic friends and Republican friends, and I apologize. It's that time of the session when everybody's tired. And
Everybody's meter's a little bit pegged, is it not?
I really
Senator?
apologize.
We appreciate that, and I thank you for coming. And well, I'll get with you this afternoon or in the morning.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes,
Commissioner.
sir. Yes, ma'am.
I do respect the fact that you're going to ask him some questions, but can we send you our questions
Oh,
in writing?
absolutely,
so that you-
and suggestions.
Because people are contacting us just like they're contacting
Yes,
you.
yes, ma'am, and I'm going to give you a full hearing, on it on Wednesday. I just think there's some things that we may touch on, and we'll get the bill out before we come in on Wednesday. Yes, ma'am.
All right.
I didn't mean to cut it off. I just see that we've got several people in here on some other items, and didn't want to cover the same ground again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 27, is that you, Chairman Knight? Yes, sir.
Yeah, and again, I'm accept your thing, but I want to make a clarifying point, if I can, Mr. Chairman. One, my understanding is $39.3 million that is appropriated to our libraries. But second of all, as Mr. Chairman, I asked, if we're doing debate, let's make sure that we're using words that are intellectually honest, such as not using terms like we're going to defund the library system. That is not true. And as a leading sort of a comment, we need to stick with the bill and what's here on the paper, and not make leading comments that we're defunding our libraries. Please.
Thank you. All right. We're going to do 235. Senator, if you want to come by. Chairman Wiedauer, you're going to be here with us for the duration, so we're going to let you back clean up. Is that all right? Let's make sure we sound the right number. We had one of our members had multiple copies of your
Yes.
proposal. Let's make sure.
So the LC number that we're working off of is 500905S.
Okay, I concur.
Okay, thank you. So this version of the bill does contemplate a number of the conversations that I've had between the last hearing and this one, and then I've got some answers to questions. But just as a reminder, SB 235 would create a commission, and this piece of legislation would create the HBCU Innovation, Technology, and Economic Prosperity Planning Districts Act, recognizing our HBCUs as anchor institutions in the neighborhoods they sit that also tend to be disinvested neighborhoods. And so the genesis and the goal overall would be to allow for shared infrastructure needs to be met through resources to be found, whether it's at the state level, but the federal level, philanthropic or corporate interest. And so the biggest difference between this bill and the last is not that great, but I did clarify that this is boilerplate language. I did go back to Ledge Council to make sure that we're not asking this commission to have powers that are greater than other commissions have. So it's my understanding that this is pretty boilerplate language, and I think that's important for you to know. I did add in on line 49, I'll just walk through the changes if that's okay. On line 44, we added in subject to appropriations. There is created the district's commission. This commission would have an executive director. And obviously, none of the work of the commission can happen unless we appropriate some dollars to it. So that is really the only change on that page. When we get to line 85, we've added in, there was a question about would the commission be allowed to supersede the requests of the local advisory committees? Because remember, again, we've got the statewide commission, but really it's the local advisory committees with boots on the ground that are helping to identify the needs and the challenges and the kinds of efforts they would like to see undertaken. So the commission, in an effort to make sure that the commission isn't able to just go do things without the knowledge of the local advisory committees, this language 85 through 88 was put in so that the commission's providing the oversight, guidance, and leadership, but would give the final approval before the executive director can take action on the requests and recommendations. But the recommendations come up through the local advisory committees to the commission that approves it before the executive director takes action. So that was trying to tighten that up for everybody. And then the other change is that on lines 130 to 137, this is moved into the commission language rather than local advisory committees. So the local advisory committees, again, boilerplate language, can enter into contracts as they need to. Some of that is going to be they have somebody who wants to do some research for them. The local advisory committee would be allowed to do that and should be allowed to do that, but also the commission. And the commission will consult with and advise the governor and any other state department, agency, board, or commission, and all of those departments, agencies shall cooperate with the commission and the committees in the performance of their duties. That was only in the advisory committee section. It is now in the commission section. And those are really the only changes. After hearing your feedback and other conversations that I've had with people in the building, those are the ones that I wanted to point out.
Thank you, Senator. Does the committee have any questions on this? Again, we wanted to get this language out. Is that Chairman Knight, number 27? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess as we talked about, and I appreciate the lady, looking at and taking into consideration questions and concerns that we have. But I still have some concerns, and as it is in regards to still creating something that is outside of what our normal structure is. Specifically, I know that this is a mix of some USG institutions and non or private institutions. But in regards just to the institutions that are under USG, obviously, the Constitution Board of Regents, they have, I guess, authority and oversight, rulemaking, to overlook our universities. Isn't this getting outside of and going around the USG? And I don't see anywhere in here in regards to what happens when there's conflict or the Board of Regents takes action or doesn't take action versus what happens when the commission comes out with a recommendation or a decision.
Great question, thank you. USG continues to control, as they always have, really what happens on the campuses. Even if there is an idea that's lifted from a local advisory committee that has to do specifically with on the campus, I believe today the process for anything that's happening on the campus that might be capital improvement, programmatic, which this does not contemplate at all, but has to be approved up through the regions with the president and university leadership making those conversations. None of that changes. The thing that this bill is trying to do is say that there are some infrastructure needs that the state may not be ready to invest in, but that the neighborhoods could also use, and where there's those shared needs, there are other opportunities to find funding to do those things. So I'll point specifically to sidewalks, beautification. I mean, because we know that people aren't just picking a school just for the school, but they really are picking a school based on the town and where it's located and the opportunity. This is an opportunity. This bill contemplates how do we bridge that town and gown concept around these schools in these neighborhoods that are generally disinvested neighborhoods. So on a shared infrastructure need, for example, it could be some beautification. It could be beautification in the neighborhoods surrounding the campus, but it could be something more serious like digital infrastructure and broadband, where the town also does not have that. In the case like that, maybe that's something that can be brought to that area that benefits the school that's outside of the gates of the campus, or maybe it's better to have that be inside of the gates of the campus and let the school become a hub to the neighborhood. But anything that's happening inside the gates of the campus really is under the control of USG and the university leadership that they appoint.
I appreciate the lady's comment. I still have I guess questions though. We have local elected officials, and certainly our communities that surround our university campuses. They have a stake there, and I know that there are partnerships all the time that work together between universities and our local communities, but it seems to be working in a sense of we don't need legislation at the state level to codify this, and that's what I'm wondering if my concern is we may be usurping a lot of authority, a lot of the local authority given through the elections of our local leaders, and in some cases I can see this getting sort of commingled between our university system and locals, and so I just wanted to I appreciate the ladies trying to listen to the questions and concerns, but I still have some of those concerns.
I would answer that by saying a couple of things. One, right now, first of all, this bill does not have anything built in where we are offering tax incentives. There's no taxing authority. There's no bonding authority. That is something that is available for sure at the local level, the county level, and already available at the state level too, if you think about some of the work that our state economic development department does. So this bill, more than anything, wants to put HBCUs at the table for those conversations. And that is not happening in a systematic way. In many ways, and we talked before about right now there's one interim president at Savannah State, and Albany State will come July 1st have an interim president. And so even with an interim president, even with people who might be coming in new to these schools, we want them to be able to have a seat at the table in those conversations about community development and economic development in a systematic way so that it's not just driven by personality. USG just launched a national search for the next president of Savannah State and Albany State. Those people, if they're not already in Georgia and in those cities, are going to come in brand new. And more than anything, what this would codify is that the relationship between the schools and the neighborhoods in which they sit are an important one, and how do we bring those closer together without usurping anybody's current power, because those still exist. And the local advisory committees really would be made up of local leaders, and an economic development folks who are in those specific towns already. And today, they're disinvested communities. So nothing's happening, and doesn't benefit the school or the neighborhoods themselves.
Do you have anything further? Number Chairman Dickey. There you go. Yes, sir.
Me.
What? Over here it said Dickey, but you, I don't know. It was, we just picked the wrong. I mean, we couldn't tell what number you are. So
He's
if-
got his light on too, so you go ahead.
Well, thank you,
guys,
Mr. Chairman.
You guys wrestle
I'll-
over there.
I'll make it
Whoever goes
quick.
first. Yes, sir.
I don't have a whole lot more. I think Chairman Knight phrased very well my concerns, very similar to him, trying to, with this bill, creating another commission. And I can assure you, down in my neck of the woods in Peach County, where Fort Valley State University is, and I see Chairman, Representative Stinson here, who we both really think a lot of Fort Valley State, the Fort Valley State University, and I can tell you, you don't need another organization, commission codifying the involvement in that community around that university and that university. I can promise you, Peach County and City of Fort Valley are working very hard to try to prop up that community and the communities around that school. And I worry putting another layer, another silo of people there is just a little much. And I appreciate you trying to add to it and do all we can to improve those areas. But I just have the worry that we're adding a little too much at this time on that. So I'll turn it over to Chairman Perkle here.
I'll let you know about that. I'll let you know where we go next. No, I am going. We do have one person between Chairman Dickey and Chairman. We do have a number of things on this afternoon. We're the day before day 39. So I appreciate everyone's comments. We'll get an opportunity if we get a motion to debate the worthiness of the lady's proposition. Let's try to keep it to ask. If you don't understand what it's saying, let's try to keep this to a question and answer so that we can get to the final two items on our agenda. With that, Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really quickly, you said you added, I have too many things in front of me right now. You said you added the line subject to appropriations.
Yes.
Just really quick, has anything been appropriated for this? And if so, what is the actual anticipated cost of the commission?
So, no, and we have not yet passed the budget in the Senate. And of course, it has not then gone back to conference committee, so no. But my anticipation would be certainly in year one, just to get it going, somewhere in the $300,000 range. I mean, I think after that, we would find that there's enough dollars and stuff that start to flow down that would enable it to continue to keep going. But in order to hire an executive director and start the work.
Thank you.
Chairman Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On line 130, I am still concerned. The commission shall be authorized to enter into all contracts or agreements necessary or incidental. And necessary, incidental are really, really broad languages that we have in this bill, from very small to very large. And that seems to be wide open, and I am exceedingly greatly concerned about that. Trying to keep it absolutely, Mr. Chairman, to your looking at actual numbers. I don't see how we can define that and know where I can feel comfortable with that. And secondly, 135 through 137, all executive departments, agencies, boards, commissions, and authorities shall. That shall is a big word too. It's only there's 5 letters in it, but it means a lot. Shall cooperate with the commission and the advisory committees. My concern is, you mentioned we should not be driven by personality. It appears to me that we're setting up to be driven by personality with an executive director. All of us, if you have multiple kids, and I've got multiple kids,
I do too.
and they all think, so if you ask them, who's the favorite? Well, Deanna thinks the youngest is the favorite, and the youngest thinks the oldest is the favorite, and none of them are right. But when you have one executive director and you've got 5 mouths that are wanting to feed off of a finite pool of money, I think we will be driven by personality. That is the fatal flaw in this bill to me, Mr. Chairman.
Isn't it true?
Is that not true?
Is that not true?
Can I answer that?
You may.
So I think that the thing about feeding off of the money in the bill, because this does not, there is no funding for any project that's in this bill at all. At the end of the day, based on the master plan that the local advisory committees may create, determining what they think are their largest priorities, that is the point at which one could try to find the resources and the dollars to support those projects. And then the projects, of course, would, and any appropriations that are done through grants, whether it's the federal government, whether it's literally grants or corporate donations, are for specific projects. So the projects are the projects, the dollars that are generated, really donated towards the project or granted to the projects are for specific projects. So it's less so that everybody's gonna be like, we have $1 million, now everybody fight for it, because a project would have a cost, and that project would be funded or would not be funded, and it's not even really through the state specifically that we're funding that project. It is really through the state and or other entities that want to really participate in this district and in helping to catalyze the district.
Representative Barnes, number 4.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
2. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Senator, for your passion in trying to improve our HBCUs. My question is from lines 58 through 60. How are we weighting this? How do we know that the individuals that are going to be placed on this commission have the ability and achievement with knowledge and experience in the matters to HBCUs? I think my fear is that we will appoint people who don't have HBCUs at their best interests. So through 58 through 60, how are we vetting these individuals who will be on the commission? How is that weighted, and how do we know that they have HBCUs in their best interests?
I suppose, like at the end of the day, I suppose I can't sit here and guarantee that, right? It is clear, though, that by having in an 11-member commission 2 who are HBCU presidents currently, and by having a member that the Speaker of the House can appoint who must be a member of a community that houses an HBCU, and then allowing both the minority leader in the House and the minority leader in the Senate to both appoint 2 members. I mean, I think the intention is that you've got people who not only understand the importance of the anchor institution, but also understand why it's important that the neighborhoods in which they sit do well. Schools will do well when the neighborhoods do well, and vice versa, that symbiotic relationship. I did not mean to overlook, though, one other change that I made in the bill right above that, which is that line 55. That was also new. In making such appointments, the appointing individual shall endeavor to ensure the membership of the commission maintains representation from each planning district, to make sure that it's also not heavily weighted one city versus the other city, but that in fact the commission has folks across Albany, Fort Valley, Savannah, Atlanta, Augusta.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Jackson, Edna Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for bringing another document back to us that, and some of the things have not been answered that we asked for or that you said. You have used several phrases here today. Could be, should be, brand new, I support, I think. Yeah, I think that the idea, your wishes would be great, but again, I have to repeat myself, and that is because of a lack of cooperation with other institutions that did not know about this. That there comes a time when we have to think back and start all over again. So that being said, Mr. Chairman, I recommend, or no, I move that this be tabled until another time when all entities, including interim or presidents of the institutions that have not been very verbal about this, and all people that have asked comments and made comments today that could have been answered because these questions were raised at another time. I move that this be tabled.
Representative Jackson, I'm not going to recognize you for that purpose at this time. We have two more questions that I would take, and
Okay.
if the lady will allow, I'll come back to you if we get. But if you don't object, I'm going to
I do not.
go to Representative Stinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator, I want to thank you publicly for your work. I know you put in a lot of hours and you traveled across this state quite a bit, trying to bring some attention to this important matter that you believe is very important at this time. Mr. Chairman, I must say that I support what Representative Jackson just placed on the table. Because my concern is, I'm going to a question here.
I was going to nudge you that way.
My question is, if this is not done this year, what will there be? What would be the major consequences if this bill is not passed this year?
So I think that we all realize that there are needs that these schools have. If this bill does not pass this year, then it doesn't pass this year, and then we can come back in another year. We'll have passed by, and we will still have the same needs, many of the same needs, and the neighborhoods likely will too. So it can wait, but I do think that our HBCUs deserve our not just attention, because I think they have that, but some effort and movement to support the work that they're doing outside of, and even outside of the walls. We know that enrollment is driven also by what's the town look like. So many of our schools, and I know you know this, so many of our schools have housing for freshmen. That's it, for freshmen. And so then it does matter what's also happening in the town, because the students are the town. How do we improve the schools if we can't improve the towns, and vice versa? Your best college towns, and the ones that we talk about a lot under the Gold Dome, are the ones that have that. They have the best of both of those two worlds. Our HBCUs are phenomenal academic institutions, and they do have great leaders, but they don't have all the resources that they need, and the towns that they're in don't either. So what happens? Nothing. Status quo. We just keep on going the way that we have.
And I think an option could be, and may I just one follow-up question?
Ask a follow-up question.
Yes,
yeah.
one follow-up question.
Don't keep me on my toes
Is it not
today.
true that I believe to address your statement about what happens if this bill does not pass now? Is it not true that I believe that if our presidents would engage the communities in the cities that their universities sit in, I believe, isn't it not true that I further believe that if those presidents should engage the communities and make the community leaders aware of what their concerns are, you can't leave from your office all the time. You got to get out into the weeds and be among the people and the folks that are actually making these decisions that impact your university. Isn't it not true, Senator, that I believe that if these presidents should do this, then maybe that would change the narrative about how their communities look? Is that not true?
I believe you believe that, yes.
There you go. I love it when a plan comes together. No, I know both of you. I know I had one more question. He waived. Now I have another one from Whip Park. Do you have a question? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Halpern, I appreciate the bill. I appreciate all the hard work that you put into this. I think the one recommendation I would make, and again, hearing the concerns of my Democratic colleagues, is again, when creating the composition of a commission like this, to ensure, even for members of the minority party, because we know that minority and majority parties, they can change, that HBCUs with the overall commission, not just the advisory commission, are explicitly tied to members of the HBCU community.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got Chairman Jaspers back involved. Yes, sir.
No, back in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quickly, Senator Halpern over here. I think if you've been on this committee a long time, you know the impact the HBCUs do to their communities. There's no doubt about that. And, you know, the only two things I have is that, you know, on lines 53 and 54, I believe the speaker should make in the House, and the president of the Senate should make theirs, you know. But in the end, right this moment, I want to support Ms. Jackson's motion to table.
Well, if there are no further questions, the chair would just like to thank the lady as well for bringing this forward, and say that the HBCUs are important. I think what I've heard from my members on this committee is some of them perhaps got caught a bit off guard, you know, because of your forward thinking. And I'm not saying they're behind, but I mean, just I think you got an opportunity to bring them along. So if at this time, I promised Representative I'd go back to her, and I will recognize her for a motion. If she chooses to move forward with that, I would prefer just a motion to lay it on the table rather than to lay it on the table to a date certain. If you would be inclined, Senator Jackson, I'm just looking for your number there.
Not a senator. I'm not a senator.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at that senator, and I didn't mean to demote you, Representative Jackson.
That's all right. That's all right. I so move that this. You changed what I said that this be tabled, not date certain.
Yes, ma'am. You laid out. I hear your motion as a motion to table. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a second? Okay, that we have a motion and a second to table. That motion is non-debatable, but just to be clear, what I thought you heard saying before is you were giving several circumstances that would have to happen before it come up. The motion today would just to be lay it on the table until such time this committee decided to take other action, which would give the senator opportunities in the next day or two to change some hearts and minds. So with that, it is a non-debatable.
Mr. Chairman.
It's a non-debatable motion.
Okay, I just want to be clear now.
I understand, but it's a non-debatable motion.
Thank you.
I'm going to
Thank you.
I have a motion that this motion and a second this item be tabled at this time. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Does the gentleman wish a division of the House? You good with I believe the ayes have it. Do you wish? Okay. The ayes have it. It is laid upon the table.
Oh,
thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Chairman Wiedauer, you want to tell us about our last two propositions?
Thank you, Chairman.
If you could just bring us up to speed on the LCs that we should be working from.
Yes, sir. Committee, before we left the chamber last week, with exception of a few that had other obligations that weren't on the floor, hand-delivered LC 365885S. We also emailed it to the entire committee. Subsequently, there were a few changes that were minor, and we will go through those, that created LC 365888, which was emailed to everyone yesterday, with comparisons not only from 5885 to 5888, but also from the original bill of SB 386 to then now LC 36588S. Going through, and we'll just go through all the changes quickly, from Senate Bill 386 to LC 36588S. Not to take from Senator Walker's approach too much, but this has been long debated for 14 months. Substantively, the language in this bill hasn't changed significantly since it was brought to this committee last year. But having said that, we did go in part one, remove the language dealing with gross betting income. Made it pretty clear last year, sticking to my word, that I don't want the definition of taxable income to include deductions for promotional credits. So that's what that removal was. Lines 248 to 250, there was some cleanup language just in regards to defining one of the licenses as it addressed motorsports. Part two, what was lines 418, obviously a lot of things shift around. From 418, you're going to be looking at 393 to 401 right now. You'll just see some cleanup language to make sure that the people that are applying for these are the appropriate individuals with clean records and no affiliations to sports teams or athletes, etc. Part three, my good hard-working friends at the Department of Revenue, after 14 months, decided to finally weigh in and wanted a small change. Instead of saying local sales and income taxes, it now says local sales and use taxes, comma, income taxes, etc. Appreciate their input at this hour in session. Part 5, line 843. Excuse me 1 second, sorry about that. Didn't complete my notes on that one. 843 to 865. Oh, excuse me, yes. So at lines 843 to 865, we added additional language just to toughen up what this allows for in addressing any problem gambling. I did skip one line, I apologize, in part 3, line 615. There were some concerns and commentary in the last meeting that addressed the fact that if we're going to have enough money to kind of deal with some of these issues that we want to offer. You know, I've long since said that part of this and part of my concern and desires of passing a measure like this is that right now, respectfully, if you don't mind me, Chairman Washburn could be placing a bet on his phone right now and none of us would know it. He would circumvent a geofence. He would circumvent a geofence that's in this state right now. He'd use a VPN. He would vote. He would place his bet. It might think he's in Tennessee or North Carolina or Florida, and he'd place his bet. Those tax dollars would go there, and we would have no ability in the state of Georgia to protect Chairman Washburn from any of those activities. So one of my biggest things in this is to allow for those people that are doing this on the black market to bring it into an arena that is legalized and regulated by the state of Georgia for the Georgians that are participating in this today. Lines 843 and 865 merely add some language to that. And then line 615 increases the taxable tax amount from 20 to 25% to keep those tax dollars here in this state and allow for the ability for the state to go after the people that engage in unscrupulous activities such as advertising to our youth. That is the measure. Certainly will take questions. I've taken my plenty over the last 2 years. I stand for any questions. On behalf of
Thank you.
Senator Dixon.
I'm sorry?
On behalf of Senator Dixon.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. We have two measures related to this, and I know Senator Calvertson. Senator, you want to talk to us about the? Oh my goodness! We were supposed that was supposed to get to you. Can we get a copy of? Okay, well then take a look at that, Senator. I think you and I
confirm the LC.
550316S. They were I apologize, Senator. They were instructed to share that with your office as they were bringing it to Chairman Wiedauer or myself. Does committee have any questions of Chairman Wiedauer over the changes? Number 27.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Knight.
To my friend who I know has worked diligently on this and done it in a way that, quite frankly, I tell you, we all ought to work like that. And I sincerely mean that. Now, we may disagree on the underlying issue, but if everybody worked as hard as he did and in a way he did, we'd be all better off for it. But I guess my question, and I asked the senator in the initial meeting, was, a privilege tax, and I don't know that we have on the books a privilege tax. My understanding is we don't, and so this would be a new tax, and I'm just wondering, in regards to a privilege tax, what exactly that is, because we do not currently have one under Georgia code.
Without attempting to take any credit for working hard, I think the only people that have worked harder on this measure are sitting in the back corner over here, Nick Tate and Sean Marie Story. And when we address that question with them, I believe that is a definition in code that they're suggesting is appropriate. So we did run that to ground, Chairman. And so if Ledge Council wants any other commentary on that, but my understanding is that is in code and not something that we are creating, but merely a definition that was chosen for this particular type of tax.
Okay, I'll get with Ledge Council.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Wiedauer, or Chairman Wiedauer, I want to also express my gratitude for your hard work on both measures, the enabling as well as the CA, and certainly for taking into consideration some of the comments that I made. The question on the enabling bill is, does this allow for fantasy sports?
So the way this is written is the same, very similar, if not exactly how it's written in North Carolina, where fantasy sports, where it has been approved and fantasy sports continues to exist today. Okay, and just as I've been reading through the bill, I know fantasy sports is defined, yet I believe on lines 260 to 262, it excludes from the definition of wager or bet an entry fee paid to participate. And so just wanted to get some clarification there on the enabling bill. One more question on the constitutional amendment. Is there anything in this CA that would allow for some of these funds to go to needs-based aid for higher education, with Georgia being one of a handful of states that does not have needs-based aid for higher education?
Want me to address that?
So I'll address the second one first, and we may need to go back to the first, make sure I understand I address it correctly for you. With this, the CA clearly is putting this to the Georgia voter and whether or not they would choose to allow for wagering on mobile online sports betting to be allowed in the state of Georgia. I cannot think of a better time to gauge the true interest of that in the state of Georgia than that of a presidential election. I think we would all agree, and I think statistics will back me up 100% of the time. There's no greater turnout than that of a presidential election, which is obviously my desire of getting a CA on the ballot this year, so we can kind of put this to bed. And listen, if I'm wrong, if Georgians don't like this, no harm, no foul. I don't participate in this anyway. Really, that's mute on me. And quite frankly, my good friend Chairman Washburn will place that bet the next day anyway. So, and you know, so that's just the sad state of the facts. The other part of that is you know, I've been at this for 14 months. It's been discussed longer than that. My door has been open from the very beginning of this. I know that Senator Cowsert has also been at this with the original CA. I'm sure his door has been open as well. You know, we have a lot of arguments down here. I don't think there are any that are settled more clearly than we want money to go to education. And I think when we crack the door open to a host of ideas, you know, the number of suggestions that could come from 180 people, 236 people, quite frankly, are endless. And I think if you look at our budget that passes almost unanimously every year, the bulk of our funds go to education, and that's exactly what this does.
So just to clarify, that the answer is no in the current version of CA?
You know, it may have been a different conversation at a different point in time of this being so late in the game, and quite frankly, if we want these dollar amounts, if we want these dollars to go to education, I can tell you we're just simply out of time of some of those discussions. Representative Bart, you've been amazing. I appreciate your communication. I'm happy to talk with you offline between now and Wednesday and see if there's not something that we can come to. But at this stage of the game, I don't think we'll change that today in this committee.
Thank you.
Let me follow up if I can with what part and give you my interpretation is the funds from sports betting go to educational purposes defined currently in the Constitution, which says tuition, grants, scholarship, loans to citizens of this state to enable such citizens to attend college. There's nothing in there specifically that directs that you know, a certain percentage of that money is needs-based. There's not anything in that language that says it has to be merit-based. That's provided for by general law, so the money would go into that same education fund for educational purposes to be allocated through the appropriation process. And respectfully, and to the gentleman, we do have, you know, needs-based options. We have the HOPE grant. We have the completion grant that we've passed here. We have a number of things. I certainly appreciate the gentleman's advocacy for additional ones, but when it says we have none, I think I would respectfully disagree that none, maybe more would be what you would be advocating for. Fair enough?
Yeah, fair to a certain point, Mr. Chairman. May I ask one more question?
Sure.
Just in reviewing the CA, I recall a previous version of this having certain language that would require pre-K to be fully funded before it could be used for higher education. Is that no longer in here, or am I missing it?
No, the money goes into the education fund, which flows through in the current Constitution for the educational purposes, tuition grants, voluntary pre-K, educational shortfall reserves. This also, I would point out that this has language in Section 1-2 in the enabling legislation that the committee may want to look to modify slightly, that requires a spending of up to 10% of our reserves. That was in a bill that was on the floor last week. If I could and follow, well, let me let you finish your question. If that was the answer to the question, that it does allow for pre-K to be funded, and the way that happens is the governor recognizes the the amounts for each one of those and fully funds those.
So just again to be clear, because I know in a previous version, I believe it's lines 102 to 103, it specifically said that all proceeds would go to voluntary pre-kindergarten programs before other higher education. So simply put, this is giving the Lottery Corporation complete discretion as to how any of these proceeds would be expended for both higher ed as well as for pre-K.
Actually, that's incorrect. The lottery has no purview on where these are going. The lottery collects the money and deposits in the state treasury. And I'm looking at our attorney over there, either Nick or Sean Murray. The lottery collects the money, deposits in this treasury. It is at the discretion of the legislature, the governor and the legislature on an annual basis to determine what of those 5 things that we see on page 3 of the constitutional amendment. And I'd yield to the senator if he would chime in there. Do you concur with the current way that's done and the way that would be done in the future?
I do concur with what this amendment would do. I don't agree or support it. It is different from the version that passed the Senate in a couple of ways. That dedicated 80% to those buckets of the current scheme that the lottery has to do, Hope, pre-K, capital improvements, but it did direct that it could only be used for the other purposes after pre-K was fully funded. So it very definitely gave priority to pre-K. The other difference is you made it very clear in your last meeting that there was 5% for promotion of sports activities, et cetera, that wasn't going to be in this version, and I appreciate that. But I had 15% dedicated funding for the problem gambling addictions, both education, prevention, and treatment. This doesn't dedicate funds. It leaves it to the General Assembly, really the same way it is now when they're spending $400,000 a year out of $1.2 billion in profits, and there's nothing compelling the General Assembly in the future to dedicate any funding towards that. They're allowed to, but not required.
And Senator, you and I can.
I could be wrong.
I'll be happy to address that with you as well. I see a bit of a difference, but let's make sure.
You did. I should be fair to you. You did share me your thoughts. I just hadn't seen the final version.
Yes, sir.
Today. So I'm not shocked or anything.
What part? Did you have anything further?
No, sir. Thank you.
If I might take latitude here and just ask the senator to look at it from this standpoint, it is not true that under the current Constitution, and I'm not trying to be funny with this. I'm trying to ask you a question, really. But under the current constitutional amendment, the lottery has to pay for problem gaming out of their operating expenses because it's constitutionally problem gaming is not allowed. Is not an allowable expenditure under the current Constitution.
Yeah, that's where it's not prohibited, but that comes from their operating expenses.
Right.
Yes.
So it comes out of their operating expenses. So what we tried to do, and there may be. You may have a disagreement and may have some improvements, but what we tried to do here is make that an allowable expenditure by the General Assembly because, as you mentioned in your previous testimony, the lottery is supposed to return up to as close as possible to 35%.
Right.
When you're asking them to fund problem gaming under that, you're asking them to somewhat fight against themselves. So they need to return a higher percentage, but we want them to do things. So we were trying to take some suggestions that move the problem gaming, responsible gaming out from the lottery and allowed the General Assembly to fund that in a different area.
You do that.
But I respect the gentleman's thoughts of there may be a better way to do that, and we certainly want to work with it. We have a couple more questions, and we'll go down that toward the enabling legislation or the CA, but between Senator Calzert and Chairman Wiedauer, we have a lot of the intellect of the Athens area before the committee today. Chairman Mayfiat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did. Yes.
You good? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I represent Atlanta Motor Speedway. How will this affect NASCAR?
This allows for a not license for NASCAR. That's the lines 248 to 250.
So it's not going to cut me out, correct?
We can double check that. Representative Mathiak, I'm obviously happy to do so.
Is the question whether there would be a tethered, what is referred to as a tethered license for that event? Is Chairman Wiedauer, is that what we're talking about there? I believe it is.
Yes. Specifically 248, 249, actually.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I can,
Internationals.
with prior to Wednesday, Representative Mathiak, let's get together on that. I think we're hearing this again on Wednesday. We're not moving on this today, so I will be happy to get with you between now and
Okay.
Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to follow up on Whip Park's question about pre-K. Is there an appetite to put the language that explicitly said that no funds shall be appropriated for the other educational purposes until all approved voluntary pre-kindergarten programs are fully funded? Is there an appetite for that? Because I think there are a lot of people who get Hope Scholarship, but Hope Scholarship is not open for everyone. Pre-K is. There are a lot of constituents out there, a lot of families out there that would benefit from us fully funding pre-K. While funding Hope is great, I love it, but that's not for every single student in Georgia.
Representative Clark, I'm just going to say I would like to get with you on that because I think the science in that is the words fully funding pre-K. I mean, what does that mean? Does it mean fully funding pre-K for every child? You can't anticipate that. So I think that is the art of the creation of fully funding pre-K. It would be fully funding it to what the governor recognizes and the General Assembly approves. And we're doing that now. I know we're funding more now, but Senator, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, the way the lottery now is done, we have a reserve, and the governor recognizes revenue out of that to fund Hope, to fund pre-K, and to fund things. And I would think he would say it is fully funded for the amount of slots that have been approved.
Could be. It's, and this still leaves it up to the legislature. It just doesn't command or direct any minimum funding or any priorities of funding. You still, I call them buckets. You know, you got the Hope bucket, the pre-K bucket, the capital improvements bucket, teacher training bucket kind of, and this seems to add a problem gaming bucket, but it's not in that constitutional section C. It's just,
right.
It's out of operating expenses as I'm reading it.
Right.
I think my question might have been misunderstood, but that's okay. I can get with you afterwards.
No, I would like to do that because I think the art of the words is what does fully funded mean? It's for the appropriate slots that have been pulled. Those are fully funded on an annual basis, even though there may be more funded next year because there are more young people that would avail themselves of that. But that's a fair question, and we'll try to work through that. Representative Stinson.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I've been around for quite some time, and I've been hearing about sports betting, gambling, casinos, and so on and so forth. I just need to be really clear. When will there be some attention to need-based scholarships relating to any of this legislation? Can it be now?
There's nothing in the legislation as it's been described. I haven't really read the enabling legislation that has anything to do with needs-based scholarships. There was a previous version in the Senate last year that called for funding to go to needs-based scholarships, and it failed in the Senate. And so I revamped the bill this year and it went to pre-K instead. I'm an advocate for needs-based funding. I think that helps lift the entire state. But I've also said I'm not fighting over the exact details of where this money goes because I don't think it's a significant enough amount to move the needle on any subject matter.
Okay.
I'm just a hawk on the problem gaming, because I don't want it on my conscience when we create a problem and we don't dedicate the resources to deal with it, and I'm having to trust in a future legislature to come up with that in the budget process, which is a tough process, you know. But this is fine.
Thank you.
Representative Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. Again, I wanted to know if this allocation for educational purposes includes the free school lunch for our students, and how can we get that in there? If it's not just for all students, can we at least try to get our neediest students in there? There's a $189 million fiscal note for all students, $6.3 million for our neediest students. So it's a huge difference. And right now we're feeding over 64,000 kids with the $6.3 million. So if we could, how can we allocate that in the constitutional amendment?
Well, I defer to the chairman on that, since this is his committee sub. I don't see anything in here that provides for lunches for needy children. I don't believe that's within the authorized spending zone, so to speak, for the Lottery Corporation at the present time, unless that was changed in this constitutional amendment. I don't see it going there. But if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, tell me, because
That is correct, Senator. This goes into the buckets that have existed for the lottery. They would allow for needs-based scholarship. It would not create another expenditure in the K-12 area. Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just so that I can understand, is it not true that we're being asked to vote for this so that our constituents who want this can vote for this, but we don't have any authority over anything, money, where anything is going? We're just voting for approval. Is that not true?
Well, I mean, let me try to answer that. I mean, if you're a member of the legislature in 2025, you'll have absolute authority over the appropriations process.
Is it not true, you said that the governor is making all the decisions on how the money is spent?
No, ma'am, I said the governor would, as the Constitution requires, the governor sets a revenue estimate, and the legislature does an appropriations bill. The governor has to recognize revenue. That's how the appropriation process starts, within this fund and within all other funds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand. I think what I asked was correct. We will not have any voice in how the money is spent. Thank you.
Well, again, to the lady, I'm going to say, are you a member of the Appropriations Committee? I know some members here are members of the Appropriations Committee, and I know we resolve into a committee of the whole House when we hear the budget. So I know I personally have made amendments during that process. They did not pass, but I made amendments during the appropriations process. So I do feel like we have a voice in that process. Chairman Knight.
Mr. Chairman, as the chairman of the higher ed appropriations, it is over lottery, HOPE dollars, lottery dollars. We do have a process, and I'll remind this committee that we have appropriate dollars, and we've also looked at pre-K this year. I'll remind you that we've moved money from HOPE to pre-K for some of the programs, if I'm not mistaken, the summer programs that were in need. So, that is, to my friend and gentle lady, that is not true. We do have purview over the budget, and again, the chairman's correct. As long as we stay within the revenue estimates of the governor, we by Constitution do appropriate dollars. So the General Assembly does have that authority. So I want to make sure we're clear on that. We don't leave the public with misinformation. Thank you.
I'm not trying to give the public misinformation, but we've asked for all these things for this bill, and everything we asked for was taken out, and we've been told that we can't have anything in the bill. So that does tell me that our voices are not heard, because nothing that we asked for, we've just been told a flat no.
What was it the lady asked for?
we asked for pre-K to be fully funded, and you're saying that playing games with the word fully, but just like Clayton County is building 5 pre-K centers, so will we have money to fully fund all of those centers?
I believe the applicant, well,
Yes.
let me yield to Chairman Knight. How many pre-K spots are being added this year based on the Pro Tem Jones committee? Are you?
Mr. Chairman, I do not know. We may want to ask, some of our budget, the House budget for the specifics. I don't recall that number offhand, so I'd hate to give the committee the wrong number.
Okay.
But I do know we have
we'll get
increased
that,
slots.
Yeah, we'll get that number. And to be clear, I mean, I'll try to be crystal clear and open with this committee and all that attend it here. I'm not playing word games with fully funded, but you tell me what that means. I mean, we don't know how many pre-K people we'll have next year. We don't know how many pre-K classrooms will be built. I know there have been questions in the past about could we take money that's raised out of these educational funds and apply them to build private pre-K classrooms. The answer, I would think, there is unequivocally no, because that's a private building and that would constitute a violation of the gratuities clause. We can't build, capital projects for a private building. We can, in fact, pay for private pre-K. So that's what I mean. I'm not trying to play games with the fully funding, but when we talk about fully funding Hope, we called Hope fully funding when we used a 90% factor, but we said Hope was fully funded. Now the governor last year went to 100% factor. We still call that fully funded. So I think the point I was trying to make is I think we have about $1.9 billion in reserves in Hope. People roll their eyes and think about that being a great deal of money. And when I say in Hope, that's in the lottery funding for educational purposes to fund Hope and pre-K. What we also have is about a $1.5 billion per year expenditure for pre-K and Hope. So it's not as if we have $1.9 billion in the educational fund and we're only spending $10 million a year. So this is not a pool of money that exists out there in a vacuum. And in fact, we must realize and be fair when we're, as Senator, I'm going to quote you on this. I think I'm right on this. You're not doing this for the money, but the additional $100 million, $140 million would come in, and people go, we don't need it. We have 1.9. Remember, as we add these pre-K slots, pre-K is not inflation proof. Pre-K teachers have salaries. They have health care benefits. To feed pre-K students, those things come with it, and it's not inflation proof. So that's, I'm not at all trying to play games with fully funding, but we have to realize there's a revenue estimate the governor sets, the legislature then budgets based on that. Representative Stinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me again. Senator, you mentioned earlier from our previous question that need-based scholarships was listed in the previous legislation.
Right.
And it failed.
It did. Against my wishes. So just a history of how we got there. I've been dealing with this issue for several years, but we actually passed a constitutional amendment from the Senate. I think it was 4 years ago or 2 years ago. And the way I got there is that you got to have 2/3. So you have to have bipartisan buy-in. Mm-hmm. And I simply sat down with the minority leadership and I said, what do y'all want? And then I talked to my Republicans and said, what do you people want? Where do you want the money to go? Because this is a unique ability for us to direct where the money goes through a constitutional amendment. Otherwise, we can't do it.
Right.
And it was a different priority list. We spent half the money on rural health care. We spent some on eradicating blight. We had some for innovative educational programs, and we also had some for problem gaming in that version. There was nothing for promotion of sports, and that received enough support in the Senate and passed. Did nothing in the House. That was the year of Senate Bill 202, voting reforms, and there was a lockdown over here because the minority party wouldn't buy in really to anything until they connected it to another issue. Then last year, I did the exact same thing again, whole new set of senators, because we had a new biennial. And rural health care was less important all of a sudden. And I guess that's part of our budgeting process. Our priorities may change from year to year. So maybe ultimate flexibility is the way to go. Just pour it into the general fund and we can decide. But to get the coalition of people that will support, this will not pass without minority party support, because it takes 2/3 vote and Republicans don't have a 2/3 majority. So this year there was a different, that was last year, there was needs-based scholarships in it. I think it was half the money. And that didn't get the vote. And I don't know whether that's because the Republicans didn't want that, or it was other things in the bill, or maybe just the climate for gambling expansion. For whatever reason, it didn't. So this is the third version. And we have had a different formula every time of where the money's been directed. This one, as it sits before you now, does not have needs-based. It doesn't have school lunches. It doesn't have a priority on pre-K. It goes back to where the money is devoted in the Constitution currently: HOPE, pre-K, capital improvements in education. And that's left up to the budgeting process by this bill, but it also gives a nod. It permits spending on problem gaming if the legislature decides to fund it. So you're at a blank slate, other than the chairman has expressed his priorities in this committee substitute.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chair? Thank you for that response. And you mentioned the minority party. So are you referencing the minority party on the Senate side or the House side? Have you heard from the minority party on the House side about what the request is for support of this legislation?
I've had conversations with Leader Beverly on some of his thoughts, and I've laid him out my rationale. And I probably prefer not to reveal our private conversations. He has some differences, and they were different than mine, and I'm like, keep the ball rolling. Let's see what the House does, if the House even has an appetite for a vote, and then we can get in conference or agree, disagree, and hammer it out. I do think everybody needs to be flexible to get there. I mean, I've watched the legislature, the majority become narrower and narrower over my years. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a time we had a 2/3 majority in the Senate. We could do what we wanted to do. We don't now, and the House doesn't either, so that requires us to work together and negotiate together to get to the right place.
Well, I certainly hope there can be some negotiations for need-based scholarships and the REACH program. Definitely the REACH program, both of them. That's my thoughts. So thank you.
I'm open to any of it, but I defer to the chairman here. He's studied this issue as much as myself.
Thank you, Representative Sisson. I'm going to go to Chairman Knight on this, but the one thing that, isn't it true? I'm trying to make a statement here but I want to get this information out and I take nothing away from the senators, wish to make pre-K a priority, but we think.
Yeah, I had to do that for the Senate to pass.
No, I understand, but we think this is about $100 million, maybe.
Right.
Okay, and you want to make pre-K a priority for that. We spent, and I'm going to go to Chairman Knight to confirm this. We spent almost $500 million on pre-K this year already. So making $100 million a priority to make sure we fully fund it, we're already $500 million more than that anyway. So it's a bit of a semantic thing, and that's why putting it into a pool seemed like Chairman Knight, and then we're going to go to a couple more people.
Chairman Martin, and I don't have the exact number, but and our House budget may have more detail, but I know we fund, or we've got approved like 80,000 pre-K spots.
Yeah.
But we don't nearly are not even close to exhausting all of those pre-K spots. Is that your understanding?
I do think that's right. I think that's part of the problem is there's not that much demand for the pre-K programs. And there are children that are alive that are eligible for it that don't apply or ask for any spot. That's part of it. And what the Senate version didn't require you to fully fund pre-K first. It just said you can't spend this money in any of the other buckets on HOPE or anything until pre-K was fully funded. Didn't require you to fund, build new schools to make every child be in pre-K, just that the need was met. And I think you're pointing out that it has been met as far as the demand in today's budget. I know in Athens, Clarke County, I've asked the school people before, What do y'all keep complaining about wanting more pre-K slots? Is there anybody on a waiting list? Zero.
Yeah.
That's in Athens. I don't know about the rest of the state.
Right, and then to be clear, that I think same my way, but there are people on the pre-K wait list. I think in Georgia that's right. We got a couple more questions here, and I know it's the hour's getting late.
Yeah.
Representative Moore, do you have a question for us?
Yes, I do.
Yes, ma'am.
I may have missed it, and I know everybody has their hand in the pot. What about HBCUs? Did we discuss that? Did I miss that?
It's
Are
not
any
in
of
this
the
bill.
proceeds going to an HBCU? We don't have that many here in Georgia, but the ones that we do.
It's not in here at all. There was another Senate version Senator Beach had that included a portion of the proceeds going to HBCUs, and that did not get out of committee.
Yeah, if I could just help, I mean, to draw everybody's attention on LC 550316S, the uses of the funds are defined in lines 46 through 61. So, Representative Jackson, Edmund Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm probably the last person to come and sit on this higher education committee. And one of the things that I liked when I first heard about the bill was that there was going to be funding for the HBCUs in it. How it got out, I don't know. But I do think that this is something that can be revisited with this bill. I watch how people get new buildings that have not come up before anyone. I've seen how they have gotten new programs and all of this. But the people that are playing the lottery, I'm turned off.
You're on.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I didn't turn
You didn't
you
touch
off.
me
No,
off.
ma'am.
Okay. But the people that are the ones that are playing the various lotteries or what have you are diverse people across these United States of America. And if it's something that is going to benefit all of the HBCUs that are fighting for survival, I think this is something that should be considered. I don't know where it goes or anything like that, but I do think that we too have to be advocates. And when I say we, I'm not talking about African Americans. I'm talking about all of us that are elected to serve up here in the legislature. So I don't know what to do, Mr. Chairman, as far as making a recommendation, but it may be something that we may need to revisit. I got it from someone that has been pushing for this for a number of years, and we were assured that there was something in the bill for HBCUs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there further questions?
I would like to have some commentary if I could, please.
Well, let's see if we get y'all any more questions, and then we'll let you close off. The one thing I want to say to my friend Representative Jackson is I'm not sure. I'm several semesters shy of a law degree, but if you were to, and I'm not saying I support it or don't, but to put something in the Constitution to send some of this funding toward a university system school, an HBCU or otherwise, then we a bit run into conflicts in that we're constitutionally separated from the direct management of our university systems. So I think that's a whole constitutional situation of we could dedicate that to an HBCU or to the University of Georgia, and yet we're constitutionally separated from actually telling them how they could use it. So that might be a constitutional thing that we have to work on some more. With that, we don't have any further questions. Chairman Weeder, we had one person that had tried to get with us last week to speak on it. I'm going to allow one speaker today because she drove a long way. Would you like to have, she asked for like 2 to 4 minutes of that and then let you close?
I'll yield.
Or would you, okay, if we would, ma'am, if you would come up, and you could speak from the podium if you don't mind standing, or we can move Chairman Cowser. That's good for you.
I'll excuse myself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I get a copy of the enabling legislation you read?
Yes, sir.
I don't need to take yours, Mr. Cuidar, but, yes.
I got plenty of copies.
Carolyn York, Ms. York.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Caroline York, and I would like to tell you about the impact that sports betting has had on my immediate family. My 29-year-old son is recently in recovery from a gambling addiction that threatened to take his life. I don't think in the time I have here that I can even scratch the surface of the worry, devastation, and stress that is experienced when you have a loved one addicted to gambling. One of the problems with an online gambling addiction is that on the outside, no one has any idea that there's anything wrong. There are no physical signs of addiction. You don't nod off, or pass out. There are no track marks on your arm. You can't do a blood test for online sports betting, but it is just as deadly, if not more so, than any other addiction, because it is so easily hidden from public view. Hopefully the following will give you a glimpse into what happens when someone starts online betting. Our son started sports betting about 5 years ago while living in North Carolina and then Colorado. Living far away from home allowed him to keep his gambling habits from us for several years, but he became deeper and deeper in debt, even though he had employment that paid a good salary and was well-liked and doing well at his job. He ended up so far in debt that he declared bankruptcy to try to get his finances under control and keep a roof over his head. But the problem he needed to address was not the lack of money. It was a gambling addiction. So all his efforts were to no avail. As one of his counselors later said about bankruptcy, "Wow, thanks for the free money, U.S. government. Now my debts are paid off and I can keep gambling." About a year ago, my son was completely consumed by online sports betting, predatory loans to pay off gambling debts, depression, lying, deception, manipulation, and everything that goes along with any addiction. He had ruined many personal relationships and had nowhere to turn but to his parents. We naively thought that if we could just cut off his access to money and take away his phone and/or computer, the gambling would stop. The problem was that the access or lack thereof to funds and devices was not the issue. There was always a predatory agency that would give him a short-term loan at an exorbitant interest rate. He could always find another phone. His brain had been physically changed to demand the higher levels of dopamine that gambling gave him, identical to the effects of heroin. His brain would not and could not turn off the search for that high without an intervention. He said to us multiple times, "I just want it to stop, and I just want it to end." Try hearing that as a mom. We were desperate to help him. You have to understand that my son is an exceptional human being. He's brilliant. He skipped the first grade. He was first in his class every single year, extremely athletic. He was a nationally ranked swimmer and played on the U.S. youth soccer national team. He played soccer in college at a Division I scholarship, and graduated magna cum laude. He's an empathetic, kind, and compassionate human being. We knew all of that was still in there somewhere, even though he was withdrawn, isolated, and completely removed from the child we thought we had raised. After contacting multiple treatment centers in Georgia trying to get him help and hearing repeatedly, "Is it just gambling?" we didn't know where to turn. He and we were at the end of our respective ropes. We were terrified he would lose hope and would end up taking his life. His nieces would no longer get the snuggles of their Uncle Bubba. He was down a massive hole that he had no idea how to climb out of. In 2022, I had a chance meeting with Jeannie Seaver of Moms Against Gambling. I knew she was involved with trying to keep online sports betting from becoming legal in Georgia. So this past summer, I found her on Facebook and messaged her. She responded and connected me with a gambling addict specialist. He helped us gain access to one of only 3, and I say 3, treatment centers in the entire country that specialize in gambling addiction. And it was covered by our son's work health insurance, thank God. 5 days after our initial contact with the treatment center in Virginia, our son was able to begin proper counseling and the intervention that was crucial to his recovery. He was able to retrain his brain to accept normal levels of dopamine. Treatment centers that don't specialize in gambling do not know how to handle things that are only a problem in online gambling addiction, like access to your phone and computer. Everyone has a phone these days. It's a necessary part of life. It is also the primary way a gambling addict feeds his addiction. Imagine a heroin addict having a ready-to-go syringe in his hand at all times, or a binge eater having a tray full of their favorite food in their lap, and then tell them, just ignore it. Let's see how far that gets you. Our son is doing well now, thank God, but I am not sure that the worry and stress will ever really be over for me. It will be a lifelong process for him and a lifelong worry for his family. I implore you to not pass this legislation out of committee. Please do not send it any further. The proceeds from legalizing online sports betting in the state of Georgia are gained on the backs of people like me and the lives and deaths of people like my son. This really is a matter of life and death. It is not, as Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones has said, money that just falls in our lap. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're going to go now, Senator Chairman Wiedauer. Do you want to close us out?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of comments. I don't know if I can address everything. First, I want to commend your district for building pre-K slots. That's one of the issues that we have, is that we don't have enough public locations for us to do that. And when we start talking about directing dollars towards pre-K facilities, we get into the gratuities clause, and we're not going to, the state's not going to build private pre-K classrooms. So I, again, commend your district for doing so. I'm fairly certain that I could put all the money in the world in your district and you're not going to vote for this. But so I do appreciate it, though. I appreciate them making those slots. But I would contend that with us fully funding Hope as it is, and the trickle down, this is going to create more opportunities to fill those classrooms. It just simply is. I've got a couple of things that I'll address. I think through this entire process, I've been very transparent with each and every member on this committee. Representative Jackson. All right, you're back. Good. As long as I've touched this measure, we haven't talked about HBCUs. I'm not sure where that has come from, but as long as I've been involved with this, that hasn't been on the table. Not that I'm not supportive of it. What I would say to that is I didn't want to turn this into an Oprah affair, right? Everybody gets a car, and then what happens? Nobody gets really anything. Because if I open the door to free lunches, which I'm empathetic with, but in my, in Athens, Clark County, the entire county is at a poverty level, and they actually encourage nobody to bring lunch to school so that the whole district can get the free lunch. Okay? So, I'm empathetic, but the second we start cracking that door, I keep picking on my good friend Chairman Washburn. He may bring a pet project for his district in Macon that is suddenly very important to him when we start saying yes to everybody. I've said no to more people on this bill than I ever thought I would, whether that's from the operators to any interest that has come in here. I kind of set the line and I try to toe it the entire time through this entire process. The story that we just hear, hugely empathetic to. Again, and we can have a conversation offline, and I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the people that have come to speak against this. But those situations happen in illegal markets. Those happen in situations where when I wrote this bill, I was refused to let the operators take a credit card for any wagering on this because I wasn't going to allow them to put them in that hole, not in a legal market. If somebody chooses to go down the illegal market, they are going to choose that path. This, I firmly believe, at least puts guardrails on what Georgians are doing today. I believe it in my heart, or I wouldn't be carrying this. I'll leave it at that. I will say two more things real quick. Got to pick on my DOR folks one more time. I love you, Austin. But There are going to be two minor changes for y'all on Wednesday. Again, being transparent when this enabling legislation comes back. There was one that they are adding on. If you guys will look at line 637, we are simply going to add 2 words after local sales. It's going to say local sales and use taxes. So you will see that change on Wednesday. And then there will be a change on it that will happen on 5 different lines. It was a Scrivener's error, but we're going to fix it on lines, if you will, just 73. I'll read them out. It's all the same thing. It's striking the words lottery game of, and it's because it's aligning the same language in the CA. It will be regulated under lottery, but it's not a lottery game of. So we're just striking those 3 words on 5 lines, which are lines 73, 265, 347, 1102, and 1119. Those will be the only changes you see Wednesday. Everything else will be as is, as it sits here on your table today. My office is 401 Cap. If anybody wants to come by and see me, my door has been open for quite some time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Wiedauer. I would like you to also, I'm going to put this out for your consideration on lines 49 and 50. When we're talking, this is the language that really should help for the folks that want to see fully funding of pre-K to use the lottery proceeds in excess of the required reserve. This was language we saw in the bill that Chairman Allen Powell presented on the floor. And I would suggest that on line 50, you would change net proceeds deposited into to appropriations from such account. The idea being that when you're trying to keep a reserve, if you keep your reserve based on income starts falling, then your reserve starts falling. And when income starts falling is when you want your reserve to stay true. Income reserve should be about non-discretionary spending, not income. And I think that's something that I've spoken. I know this is near and dear to Representative Stacey Evans. She and I have spoken about that. I think we both agree that would be ideal. It has been like that in the past, but I would suggest that it didn't matter because you weren't actually drawing from the reserve based on that number. So take a look at that and see if you agree with that. With that, I see your light. Chairman Wiedauer, you'll have the last word.
Yes, I agree with that, and I apologize I missed that in my closing remarks. But I just want to say one last thing. The committee, assuming Sean Marie and Nick have worked as hard as they have before, I will have this emailed to each and every member by the end of the day. What we'll see Wednesday, which again will have those few minor changes. We will have a red line copy attached with that, so you guys can see those things, so that there are no surprises on Wednesday. And thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the business we have before us today. I have a schedule for 1 o'clock Wednesday. 1 o'clock Wednesday, the agenda to be determined. No further business for the committee. Will stand adjourned without objection, and seeing none, we are adjourned.